Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sauna Twins podcast. Now, before we get started, I just need to do a little bit of housekeeping. Unfortunately, later on in the episode, the audio drops out just as our guest is beginning to describe something. So I'll be hopping back in to add a little bit of context and keep the show on the road. Now, without further ado, let's get back to the episode.
Okay.
And we are.
Well, here we are.
Yeah.
We're live with Stig, the Secretary General from the Norwegian Badstulaug. For people who don't know Norwegian, that's the Norwegian Sauna Society. Stig, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm so happy to be here. Finally, we've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah, we have. Coming. Yeah, it means a lot to us. And obviously, we're both booming sauna cultures, and there's a huge amount that we're both learning from each other about how this amazing industry is evolving. So let's kick off. Tell us a little bit about the Badstulaug and your rise to power in the
rise to power. Yeah.
In the Politburo of the.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds very like communist, doesn't it? Very like Soviet Union. Yeah. And it's just a brief anecdote on that. You know, when I was asked if I could if I want to be employed in Norges Badstulaug, as it's called. I'm very impressed by your pronunciation, by the way. The Norwegian Sauna Association, as the first employee to start building an organization 1.5 years or almost 2 years ago, I said, I'll do it if I can call myself Secretary General, because then I can call myself the Badstu General, which means like the Sauna General. And and in Norway, like I think in the media, they love like someone who is like seen as the leader of any certain movement in society or whatever. You know, they say that movement or that thing, and then they put general on at the end. So if I can call myself Badstu General, I'm really happy about that.
Nice.
So.
I want to see there with a dressing gown that has like a North Korean general with like way too many medals.
I should get a bathrobe with those medals on, you know.
Yeah. And one of those sort of Soviet general looking hats that you can
and a weird kind of golden rope with lots of tassels.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's going to be for next year. But no, I mean, I grew up in one of these houses built in the early 1980s. With a sauna in the basement.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And my father is a carpenter, or was a carpenter, and he built a whole, huge house with his own hands. And, in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of growth and wealth in Norway, and it became a status symbol to have a sauna in your basement. And most of them, like here in the UK, I guess, because you guys had the same phenomenon. Sorry, it's been a long week. Ended up as storage, right? Mm-hmm. And but not in our house. I remember quite vividly that it was used. I mean, that's where I learned to like sauna when I was a kid. I remember my parents taking it, not necessarily that regularly, but at least that's where I got the taste of it and realized I enjoy the heat, I enjoy the sweat, mm-hmm. So I've always, when I'm somewhere, try to go to a sauna, and then my background is in political science and conflict studies and security policy. So
perfect for the
general. No, but and I ended up working as a journalist. So I worked as a journalist for many years, and it was natural. And I written a book about something completely else. And me and a friend, we were seeing this sauna boom emerged in Norway, and we were thinking like maybe we should write a book about it, And we didn't have the time, but we were sort of waiting it out. And but I started connecting with the Norwegian sauna community because I wasn't really into it. So I started finding out who's who, and Oslo Badstuforening, the Oslo Sauna Association, had started growing, and I had been there many times, and I started orienting myself in the community. And at some point, I meet Mikkel Aaland, who has been on your podcast.
Friend of the podcast,
friend of the podcast, friend of yours, great friend of mine. And he calls me up one day and says, Stig, you got to come down to Farris. I was like, Farris, the spa? He's like, yeah. Like, when? Tonight. I was like, why? The guys are going to be there. I was like, who? What guys? The Badstu guys. I was like, okay, I have no idea about Badstu Norway. I'm going to say Badstu a lot, but it means sauna for most people, right? So I go into a sauna at Faresbad, the famous spa in south of Oslo, where a lot of Norwegian, I would say, progressive, modern spa sauna culture is being created and nurtured.
So that's in Larvik.
Larvik, a couple hours south of Oslo, where Lasse Eriksen is sort of the big brains behind everything, and he's the big sauna guru in Norway now. And I walk into a sauna there, meet people I've never met before, and before I walk out, I'm on the board of an organization I didn't know existed, which was the Norwegian Sauna Association, Norges Badstulaug. And
did you have any say in it, or?
I can't really. It was sauna brain. so yeah, I ended up there with Mikkel, with Lasse, a few others. A couple of them had started it in 2017 because they realized that Norway, like many other countries, needed a national sauna association. There had been some attempts before, but it was mostly one guy in some rural community somewhere who was really into smoke sauna and who was just like not expansive, not progressive, not like looking to unite the country and represent Norway abroad and all those things that they thought about. So they tried that, and I was on the board. We had a lot of good times, but we didn't get to do much. We were just voluntary. And we were all busy people, and we didn't really understand like how should we use this organization, what should we do, what is it for. And I tried to pull out because I was like, I don't want to take part in something where I don't feel like I contribute. So after 3 years, I managed to sort of pull out of the board, feeling like I had barely contributed at all to Norwegian sauna. And then I guess only like 2 months pass, and Ragna, who is the Secretary General actually of the Oslo Badstuforening, the Oslo Sauna Association, and Vice Chair of the board, she calls me and said, "Stig, we got some funding to hire someone, 50%, to start build an organization and see if we can actually make something out of this. And we want it to be you." And I was very flattered. And it sounded like way too much fun. And it was a good timing in my life because I had just moved to a small farm and I was just doing, random jobs that I liked, and I had the flexibility to do it. So I said, yes. And that's, that's going to be 2 years in August. And we've increased my position a little bit, but since the start, I guess I've been working 150% with this. So it's just because it's a boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of listeners in the UK, and certainly a lot of the people I would speak to, perhaps wrongly assume that Norway is a native sauna nation, that it's a big part of it, and often surprised to learn that actually it's similar to the UK in that yes, there is elements of historic thermal bathing, but it's certainly not the same level of sauna or bastu culture that has existed in Finland and the sort of eastern side of Sweden. Did you find that, you talked about growing up that you had this basement sauna and that there were more symbols of prestige? Certainly when we were growing up, people who had a sauna, it was like a hot box appended to a swimming pool, and it was full of pool toys, and it basically never got used, right? Is that generally the case? I've heard stories about remote areas that have wood burning saunas and things like that, but actually most of the Norwegians I speak to will say actually didn't really have that much exposure to sauna growing up.
So this is an interesting and sort of complicated issue. And an issue of historical interest, and where we're working now to try to establish some more knowledge about this, because there is some, and I normally say that the badstue has, for all we know, existed as long as the Finnish sauna. For all we know, there could be as many badstuer in Norway as there were saunas in Finland 1,000 years ago. We know that that the Vikings were taking badstue. We have the tales of the Viking kings going to the badstue and so on. But of course, we don't know for sure how big it was. But certainly we can say that badstue was the original bath in Norway, because that's basically badstue. It means bathhouse. Stue is the word for a house or a building that was heated, and bad means bath. We had a different word in Norwegian, in Old Norwegian, for immersing yourself in water. That was lauging. It's a completely different word for washing yourself, right?
Oh, wow.
So, and that's where actually the name for Saturday in Norwegian comes from. Laugardag, which is the old name for it, means washing day.
Wow.
And now it's called lørdag, which is just a modernized version of it. But we do have a really interesting, I know you guys are into history, right? And we have a super interesting account from 1432.
Wow.
Where the Italian merchant, nobleman and merchant, Pietro Querini, he was on his way from Crete to Flanders in, Belgium. And they got caught in a storm out here in the British Channel, I think, English Channel. And they just got off course and drifted for I don't know how long. Ended up far north of Norway, above the Arctic Circle, in an island called Røst, at the tip of Lofoten Archipelago.
Wow.
And they spent 3 months there while trying to fix their ship. And he has this great written account about those 3 months there. And there's a really interesting passage where he writes about both the relationship between the genders, but also about their habit of going to the badstue. So he writes that they were surprised that they didn't seem to be afraid of their belongings. They didn't lock them in, and they weren't either afraid of their women, because they slept in the same house as them, and in front of them, in front of the guests, the Italians, the women, the daughters, and the wives got undressed naked and went to bed. And then he said, and every Thursday, they dressed down in their house, and everyone ran through the village, about 500 meters, down to the badstue, and they're all bathed together, the men and the women. And that's in 1432, right? So it's a really great account of what was probably normal badstue life in Norway in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
But then what happens? It's always these conquerors, right? So we got conquered by the Danes and came under Danish rule. And a couple of 100 years later, the Danish Puritan king, Christian IV, he didn't like, men and women bathing naked together. I guess his impression of bathhouses was the continental city bathhouses that kind of had turned into brothels at that point in time.
Right.
So he just, through different kinds of laws and regulations, practically made nudity ban. And that was it for Norwegian badstue culture.
Wow.
In the early 1600s.
Yeah.
So it got wiped out for 300 years. I mean, here and there, of course, there were a few people taking badstue, but it just disappeared. The building didn't disappear because it was still used for drying grains, and it was still called the badstue, even though no one took badstue in it, but they dried grains. And there were minorities, Finnish minorities on Norwegian soil, who had their sauna, and they called it sauna, and they still do that. And they kept, sweat bathing alive on Norwegian soil for those 300 years. But until the basically turn of the century into the 1900s, when hygiene and all this became really important again, there was no badstue culture in Norway. So that's how we lost it. I mean, at the same time, the Finns, continuously were taking sauna, right? And that's why it's just so...
But they were under Swedish occupation.
Swedish and Russian, right? And so they weren't... I mean, so this one... guy is Christian IV, right? Who has his statues and all over Norway, like cities named after him and stuff like that. I mean, he was he ruled for 60 years, but this one guy in history, imagine, we could have been something like Finland.
Yeah. We could all be saying badstue nowadays.
Exactly, and that's a coincidence, right? And that's kind of and that's a good point, Max, because that's kind of what I'm trying to say too, that for Norwegians, it's there. Yeah. So when it's come back now, and we can talk about the current badstue boom, but I think one reason why it has become such a broad movement in Norway, and why I think it's not a fad at all, is that it sort of feels like coming home. I
it's
think
a cultural understanding.
There's something there that people feel that's deep down there. And I don't think it's just the cold and the bad weather and the darkness, It's also something about, we have some ancestry. We have a lot of ancestry in this room, in this heat, in this steam.
There was a lot of talk just for the benefit of the listener. Earlier this week was the UK Sauna Summit. So everyone was getting together and comparing ideas, etc. And there was a lot of talk of this idea of like cellular memory, which I'm quite skeptical of, but it's quite an interesting notion. And actually, if you zoom out on a global scale about the proliferation of all forms of kind of thermal and sweat bathing, maybe there is something almost genetic in terms of it feeling right, as you say, that people just naturally.
It makes sense, doesn't it? Because imagine, like genetically, people who are happy, they live longer. And if everyone was taking badstu back in the days in Norway, that was people who felt comfortable with that, who enjoyed that. I mean, it was good for hygiene as well, right? So imagine everyone, the people who hated badstu were probably more likely to die back in the Middle Ages.
It's evolutionary biology, isn't it?
Totally. And now it comes back, right? So suddenly we're sitting here, lots of Norwegians with just badstu in our genes. I mean, it's totally plausible, right? I mean, you can entertain the thought.
The people who didn't like sauna were more likely to get sick, more likely to get the plague, more likely, so this you would expect people who maintain better hygiene will have Darwinian selection over time. Totally. And that's something that goes back. This isn't just recent history, and we always talk about recent history on the podcast just because that's what we've got documented. But current thought is that sweat bathing is, because of the efficiency from a cleansing perspective. If you've got a band of 50 people migrating around or even broadly settled, trying to heat up enough water to bathe those, even if you have a family of 10, or even a family of 6 or 7, trying to heat up enough water. And I've seen in experimental archaeology places where people are stone boiling large amounts of water, right? It's an all-day affair to get water hot enough that people might be comfortable enough to, 50 Celsius to wash themselves in. But if you can just get a room hot and everyone can get in their sweat and then swim in cold water, far more efficient. So this is, selective biology for, evolutionary biology for thousands and thousands of years. And so, it comes as no surprise that the things that feel good typically are either good for us or had some sort of evolutionary benefit to.
And I have no idea if the sweat lodges here or sweat houses or whatever you call them here in the UK and in Ireland, we had the fascinating account of Rosanna at the Sauna Summit and her book written about it, which I'm looking forward to read. How did everyone do that? We have no idea. I mean, we don't really know in Norway either. There's good reason to believe that it was super normal and that was like how people did it, and it was something for everyone, but we don't really know, right?
Yeah. So. I mean, in the UK, we have some two slight. Our sort of school of thought is guided by two things. So the first is that when Caesar invaded England, we have some great accounts from around the Roman occupation of Britain, but a lot of that was spin doctrine. So this idea of civilizing barbarians, and to give you a broader lens. When Caesar invaded Gaul, he killed 1/3 of them, and he enslaved 1/3 of them. So 2 out of 3 people in Roman Gaul didn't exist after the occupation. So completely destroys oral history and culture and completely changes the way that the system works. So when they arrive in the UK, they essentially say that they're smelly, unwashed barbarians.
Yeah.
But they have very good dogs and they love their dogs. And those are two things that, exist to this day. And to talk about, having a Norwegian on the podcast, often people say the reason why Amundsen beat Scott of the Antarctic to the South Pole is that Scott refused to take dogs, because when you go with sledge dogs, you have to kill and eat half of them to feed the other dogs, right? And he believed that was not British, that you couldn't kill dogs, right? So,
fun fact: I wrote my thesis in English in high school about why Amundsen beat Scott.
And it's because sledge dogs are so much better, and also there was something
many
about
other reasons as well.
O-rings on fuel. We could. That's a different podcast. That's a different podcast for a different.
But there's a new record here, though. It took more than 10 minutes before 3 Milish guys mentioned the Romans.
Podcast. So we talk about the Romans, and then later in the 17 and 1800s. Authors referred to the Brits as the Great Unwashed, and during the Industrial Revolution, that people were dirty, smelly, and unwashed. So there's kind of cultural understanding. You know, there's in the 1800s we did have Turkish baths here in the UK, and that was a big culture. And I'm learning more and more about, when we were down in London just last week, we saw some signage at the bathhouse banya, which is from a Russian banya which existed in the East End, a vapor bath as they called it, about nearly 200 years ago. So there is pockets of sort of understanding of sweat bathing. Obviously, we understand the sort of Roman sweat bathing as well, and then also. The UK has been a bath culture for, it wasn't until the 90s when most homes got showers. In fact, I remember when that change happened, there was a point where...
Is that why you could have wall-to-wall carpets in all the bathrooms?
You could have wall-to-wall carpets, So about the time that people had carpets in the bathrooms, that people, I remember growing up, there was a time when if you had a shower in your home, people would go, "Oh, he thinks he's really cosmopolitan."
He probably
went on
also
holiday.
have a bidet.
You'd have a bidet, and they'd go, "Oh, he goes on holiday to France." He goes on holiday to France, and
that's the worst thing you can say about someone from the UK.
At the time,
French inspired.
French inspired, and they've got one of them en suites, and I remember
it's just a bathroom off your bedroom.
Why
does it need to give it a French name?
So this kind of idea that it was a European thing, and then suddenly everyone was like, actually, having a shower is pretty efficient and way better than sitting in each other's hot water.
But I want to mention one thing though, because it's interesting. The Anglo-Norse connection there. When we go back to like cleaning culture and bathing culture and badstu, sauna, and because I came across this tale, the Chronicle of John of Wallingford, right?
Okay.
According to his chronicle, the Vikings combed their hair daily and bathed every Saturday, making them attractive to English women.
This is
Many
true.
English women left their families to live with Norse men, angering English farmers and eventually leading to violent conflict. And here's a quote: caused much trouble to the natives of the land, for they were wont, after the fashion of their country, to comb their hair every day, to bathe every Saturday, to change their garments often, and set off their persons by many frivolous devices. In this matter they laid siege to the virtue of the married woman, and persuaded the daughters even of the noble to be their concubines. And this is from 1220, John of Wallingford's chronicle.
This is great.
There's a joke.
It's amazing, isn't it?
So good. And this Dark Ages period of Britain, medieval history, there is very much this idea that the public are the great unwashed here in the UK, and you can understand that if you're meeting somebody who there's that Monty Python quote where he goes, "Oh, he must be a king." He says, "Well, how do you know?" He says, "Well, he's not covered in shit."
But you can see it in the genetics in the north as well, particularly around Cumbria and Scotland, the number of red-haired people and the Viking genetics. There's actually a really funny story, albeit it's a joke, albeit not reflective of the Norse people they descended from. Where we grew up in Cumbria, there's this joke about these farmers and that they were herding up the sheep at the end of the summer, and it was a really scorching hot day, and they decided to go for a swim in the river, and they got out of the river and felt a little overcome with romance, this father and husband. And
you mean husband and wife?
Sorry. What?
Like this is I don't know what you're. I don't know.
This is 2020.
Sorry, normal here. I'm abroad. I don't know. I don't ask questions. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I had too much sauna earlier in the week.
The husband and wife.
The husband and wife. Anyway, and then they get back to the farm, and the husband says, "I cannot find my waistcoat." His waistcoat, he's misplaced his waistcoat, and he stresses about it all year, and come around the summer all over again, and they're shepherding the sheep, and they decide, let's do a swim again, let's feel overcome, let's relive the great summer of yesteryear. And he's getting undressed to go in the river, and he goes, "I can't believe it! I found my waistcoat," and it's underneath his jumper.
Yeah. So for us, this revival of sweat bathing culture is something that we've flirted with, but it still very much has that feeling of alterity, that kind of like the idea that it's something from someone else's culture.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're seeing such a boom now, and the fit that it has to our culture, is that. Brits are all about cultural appropriation. Mm-hmm. Our whole culture, we wouldn't have a national cuisine if it wasn't for that, post-colonialism. We wouldn't have the music that we have. Like all of the, many great things that have come out of the UK, with the exception of the Industrial Revolution and the innovation that comes there, come from the empire and bringing other people's music and culture and food and things like that. And this is, part and parcel of that. And so for a long time, we've tried to be sort of supporters and custodians of trying to get that right. But now the movement is so big and broad, and we were discussing this just last week, that this child has become its own adult and it's doing its own things. And I've sort of very much taken the mindset to step back and let it, because you can't.
What else can you?
Exactly, and it's kind of cool to watch people riffing on the concept and let it do the Darwinian thing of the stuff that's good will evolve and progress, and the stuff that's not so good will die out and disappear. And you see parallels in what's happening in Norway with this reemergence. So let's kind of talk about that.
Let's do that, because and there's two parts of that, which is like the what's happening in the UK and happening in Norway. Because what is interesting for me as a Norwegian observer of the UK development is sort of your obsession with Finland, right? Because actually there are people in Norway who still think that sauna, or the concept, not the word, the Nordic sweat bathing culture is a Finnish sort of invention that got exported, but the fact is that it's sort of, we're part of this joint big cultural region of similar sweat bathing cultures, which is historically dominated by a log house with a pile of rocks inside that you heat up, But since we have this word, fortunately, badstu, for the same kind of, very similar kind of sweat bathing, we sort of know that it's also Norwegian, right? And I take people to Finland to learn, because the Finns are super good at sauna. There's so much knowledge about how to build a physically good, well-functioning sauna that gives a great steam, good experience, and a good social sort of place. And I tell them to copy that, learn from that, bring those experiences home. But there's no reason why we should copy like Finnish sauna culture, unless there's something we like about it. You say, but then we copy it because we like it, not because it's Finnish, right? And that's sort of, I see to some extent happening in the UK. It's kind of this urge to copy something because it's Finnish, and sauna is Finnish, and what they do is sort of right. Of course you're failing, but everyone fails when they try to copy someone else's culture, right? And most people aren't trying. I'm just saying that there's this like urge to run to Finland for the for the answer to how everything should be. So I say sort of go and learn and bring home what's great about it, but don't try to copy the culture. I mean, because it's a different people. They're different from Norwegians. They're different from Brits. They're different, and there's regional differences. I think, the development that's happening in Norway now, and here we are sort of, because there's a flip side to the eradication of Norwegian badstu culture for 300 years. And that's the opportunity to create a new badstu culture the way we want it, right? So in Finland, there's a lot of orthodoxy. There's a lot of like, this is sauna, this is not sauna. And we see that especially when, the most obvious example, of course, is like how Aufguss culture is met in Finland, right? Which is fine. I mean, they do their thing. But in Norway, it's kind of more up to whoever.
Yeah.
They can do whatever they want to do. And then I try to help them not make shitty saunas.
Yeah.
And I try to help them build good communities. But when it comes to architecture, when it comes to like community building, when it comes to like what do you want to do in the sauna, you want to, how cultural events you want to do,
Live
do
and
your
let
thing.
live.
Yeah, live and let live.
Yeah.
And that's really nice. And I think the fact that this is possible in Norway has sort of made this boom and made, I'm not afraid to say the world look to Norway when it comes to the development of a progressive modern sauna scene or sauna culture, and not to Finland necessarily, right? So we look to Finland for building saunas, for doing all the technical
Mechanics
stuff.
and
They're so
engineering.
good at it.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And they're an engineering culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I learned so much from whenever I talk to a Finn about sauna, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to culture, it's a different issue.
Well, what we're seeing here, and it's changed even, you make a comment there about Finnish sauna, it's changed even in the last 2 years. And what's happened is, in typical fashion, as you push into more levels of authenticity, it becomes it becomes almost runaway. We're seeing, well, people go, well, I want a proper Finnish sauna, and then people go, well, I actually had a sauna in southern Estonia, which is, I want it far more like that. And then somebody else will say, well, I met with Barute and the guys from the international Lithuania, and I had an amazing pirtis, and I want that. And we're finding that people come to us with inquiries, and they go, I want a sauna that stands by the Finnish principles of sauna design, that we can do Aufguss in and be able to do pirtis rituals. And I'm going, okay, so what you want is a hybrid. You want has this, and this, and there's going to have to be some compromises on that Venn diagram.
But it can be done.
It can be done.
Yeah.
And, you point out a really important thing, which is, and we saw this at the UK Sauna Summit, if you get 60 Brits together in a sauna, they want to talk, they want to have a conversation.
Yeah. Oh, it was insane.
And it's loud in there.
And
you see the Finns in there going, whoa, this isn't sauna. This is too loud. And
even though this is, I mean, this also annoys me though, because when Finns try to explain their own sauna culture, I'm like, you're making this up, because I've been to so many rowdy Finnish saunas.
Yeah,
I don't get it. It's like, don't try to pretend.
I'm never the first to talk when I go to sauna in Finland. The number of times that a Finn will strike up conversation with you, it's like the whole ice Finn stereotype melts in the sauna, right? Yeah. And they suddenly become.
I've been in saunas where you can't even hear you. Exactly. It's loud in Finland.
No, but still.
I also, I look at what you've talked about there around obsession with engineering and mechanics, and the typical analogy that I kind of see is. Finns are an engineering culture. They love to constantly design the best possible product, but with a compromise to user experience. And people say, "Well, that's not fair." I say, "Okay, I'll give you a perfect example. Nokia made the best phones in the world. Apple won because it was all about user experience and giving the people what they wanted. The Apple iPhone wasn't better than any of the Nokia products. The Nokia products were better engineered, harder wearing, they had more functionality, they were faster, quick, but that's not what the people wanted. And I think your analogy there around, Finns being more dogmatic and being more obsessed with the orthodoxy, in part it's because they have to pay lip service to their own heritage.
Yeah.
And where we're seeing, what's interesting is the places, this, at the moment when we talk about the wellness and sauna boom, it's happening in the United States, Canada, Norway, UK, and Japan, and the UAE.
Yeah.
None of them are tethered by what has been. None of them have a historic sauna culture. So there's a boom in that because this is a new thing. There's a new wave, but it also means that they can riff on the concept and make it their own. And I think there's a balance to be struck. How that meshes with a different culture and what they want from that. We'll come on to this. Oslo has got a huge boom right now in saunas on the fjord.
Yeah,
and
floating saunas.
Floating saunas. None of those, as far as I'm aware, are you would look at and go, this is a perfectly designed Finnish sauna. They all riff on different cool concepts. They're all very different, either architecturally or in what they're trying to achieve.
And something, if I may throw a spanner in the Finnish gears of sauna,
isn't that what the only thing we're doing here?
Well, don't get me wrong. Like I've self-professed it's probably my favorite iteration of sweat bathing across Europe, and will always hold a dear place in my heart. But I just keep seeing the same kind of Aufguss bashing, and actually also an engineering culture, Germany, an Aufguss that appeared kind of post-war, so it's quite young. And it's only called sauna because that was the word that the German language adopted as well.
Exactly.
So I just don't. There's this mental block that I see in a lot of people where they can't get over the fact that Aufguss sauna kind of is different and shouldn't be compared. And it's not fair to say, you're sullying the name of sauna.
Exactly, because it's such a blessing and a curse for the Finns to have that word being internationalized. And I think it's so funny at the same time. They're complaining about people saying sauna and not sauna, and then a minute later they're complaining about people ruining the sauna, and I say no, they're just in the sauna. They're doing something else. So it's a sauna with a minuscular S. It's not the capital S sauna that you have, because it's just the generic word for like Northeastern European sweat bathing kind of thing. Well, that's what the word sauna has become in the English and other languages, and that's a blessing and a curse for the Finns, because they can market. There's so many people who come to Finland, of course, because of this, right? And that's why we know Finland as the country of sauna, because of the word. I
just love the idea that as these cultures mature, it says a lot. You can tell a lot about a country by its sauna culture. And if you look at Germany are a manufacturing culture as well. But social rules really important in Germany. Shops are all still closed on a Sunday. You shouldn't make noise on a Sunday. They have their Ruhetag on Sunday. They love bureaucracy, they love rules, and they love the idea that somebody should have the authority, and we should all pre-agree, and they should be the Meister, and they should be the one in charge, because then we have order. Exactly. And this fuses also with this. So obviously you have German sweat bathing in the post-war era, where pressures. The need for communal bathing and pressures on resource mean that they're bringing lots of people together. So when you bring lots of people together who need to bathe together, you end up designing pretty crappy saunas because it's a compromise. And it's no surprise that most of the big saunas in the world are Aufguss saunas, because actually in good normal sauna design, even in Finland, it's much more compact, right? And so a lot of, we've talked about this before in some of the earlier podcasts, in the early podcasts that we did, about the need for Aufguss comes from bad sauna design, which is
the need to overcome.
So you need to ventilate it a lot at the start, because lots of people in there, bad ventilation. You have to put scented things on the stove because it stinks in there because there's so many people. The ventilation is so bad that you have to fan people with towels and
to physically
move the air because it sits all, and so you know it's kind of birthed out of those things, but it's then gone on to create its own tradition. There's also during the Soviet period, an occupation in Eastern Germany, one of the cultural movements, the FKK, Freikörperkultur, the free body movement, was that they was almost a reaction to Soviet occupation and Soviet oppression. So people were going on holiday to the northeast German coast and to the sauna, and then they were being naked. And there was this. The Soviets were like, "Oh, we can't really do anything about this," and so it was and all of these kind of boil into the culture and the cultural identity. And then when you look at Alfgus, you go, "This all just makes sense." And and so we're sort of at the 1940s to 50s period of German. We're kind of to use the American phrase, we're kind of fuck around and find out stage.
Exactly. And I'm, as the Secretary General of the Norwegian Sauna Association, I'm kind of doing a shitty job right now because we're talking about Finland and Germany and everything. But I'm gonna bridge this into Norway because and hopefully we can stay a bit on topic afterwards.
Yeah, of course.
Because we did have a sauna boom in Norway in the interwar years, in the countryside, because in the early 1900s. The cities got running water, right? So you got the bathhouse, like the public swimming pools, and people could go get a shower and swim and everything. You didn't have the running water in the countryside. So they started, these public health organizations, NGOs, started setting up public communal saunas, bathhouses, they called them, where you had the badstu and you had water, you had hot water, you had, where people can come and clean themselves every Saturday or whenever. And according to our knowledge, we're having a project on this now, mapping out like where these were and especially how many of them are left and still running. There were more than 900 of these spread out across Norway. The Norwegian Bathing Association, which is sort of our forefathers, and these public health NGOs together, they made these like blueprints in 3 different sizes of these bathhouses that could be built anywhere in Norway, right? Nice. So they were popping up all over the place, and the badstu was the bath of the countryside, was like the slogan, right? And they had flyers and booklets made and everything. Wow. And so far we've managed to find 4 that are still operational.
Wow.
Right? And they are amazing. They're really cool. Some of them, like at least one of them has the original stove already, Norwegian stove from Romsdal, who's like the only Norwegian stove maker, famous sauna stove maker back in the days. But then of course running water came to the countryside as well, and we lost that culture. So we were kind of nearly there, and then Norway was kind of at the forefront because we were connecting with the Germans. So it wasn't sort of built on Finnish principles, but it was mostly very good saunas. I mean, they were wood fired, of course, and everything. So that was a big movement, but then that died out again, and we're trying to look back towards that movement now and see like why was that so big? What did those buildings mean for those rural communities? Because we see now not just rural saunas in general, badstu in general, as community development, and they're meaning so much to so many places in Norway right now. I go to a badstu in a random place, get to talk to a stranger, and he tells me, and he's in his 60s, right? He tells me, this is where I made my first friend in 20 years. Right? And I think there are so many reasons why this trend has become so big right now. But I think, what the whole thing in the 70s and 80s lacked was the social component. People were sitting in their own basement. It felt kind of weird to invite your neighbor over to be naked together, because that was not part of the culture right then. So now the social component is back. And for Norway, I think we always looked at ourselves as a very outdoorsy people, right? So very active, out skiing, climbing, hiking, doing all that stuff. But that culture has really boomed the last, I would say, 15 to 18 years. And came a lot with Instagram, really. It became a status symbol to be outdoors. So when at the same time, Finnish-born architect Sami Rintala, who resides and works in the north of Norway, in I think a workshop in like 2003, created what is possibly the first floating sauna. Super simple structure, just basically plastic walls with an old stove inside that they put some rocks on top, and you had to swim underneath it to come inside the sauna.
Wow.
And they put it on the Norwegian fjord, and he said, Sami, who'd been Finnish, he kind of brought the building and the concept of sauna from his background into a Norwegian context, saying, we can place this in a Norwegian fjord because Norway, the west coast of Norway, has the Gulf Stream. And the Gulf Stream is like it's just the basic layer of existence for the Norwegian, people through history, right? Without the Gulf Stream, we would be nothing. I mean, we lived from fish and oil, of course, and all these kind of things that come from the sea. There's no ice in the Norwegian fjords, right? Mostly. So you could put a floating sauna out there. You couldn't do that a lot in Finland, just put it out there. It would be just eaten by the ice. In Norway, he could do that. So a Finn makes a sauna that comes from his culture, puts it on Norwegian fjord, and it even got displayed, in a book at the what's it called, the Venice Biennale, or whatever you call it in English, right? The big exhibition. And it became a famous thing, just this really simple picture of a floating structure out at sea where you could get heat, and it was possible to combine the water and the heat. And that, inspired a lot of people. Among others, the people who later formed the Oslo Badstuforening, which has now, two floating sauna villages in the center of Oslo. Many have followed after, and the floating sauna has become the iconic symbol of the Norwegian badstu boom. To the extent that I need to tell people who are interested in starting public saunas that it doesn't have to float; it can be on land. And they're like, oh, yeah, you might be right. Yeah, suppose it could. And I rather prefer it, right? And I tell them, you have so much less, maintenance issues, and it's so much easier. So, a pontoon costs a lot of money, and then, maybe they set up their project on land instead. But of course, in Norway, we have really strict laws when it comes to building along the coast, because the law says that the coast is like, even though it's private land, anyone should have access to the coast anywhere they want. So you can go and sit, naked on private land somewhere if you want to take a swim. But so it's very hard to build. So it's much easier for the local authorities to say yes to a floating object, even though it's theoretically under the same rules, because they know that if they get complaints and stuff, they can just from one day to the other say, guys, you got to move. But they've become so popular, right? So it's just spread out. So there's like different things that have come together and created this massive boom that we now seen, and that I think you guys are here in the UK. I hear at least that people here in the UK find inspiration in Norway to when it comes to both developing saunas. I was just in a floating sauna in Liverpool yesterday.
Wild sauna
that I know was inspired by Norwegian project Pust, which is an operator in several Norwegian cities. Eric, one of the managers of Pust, or owners of Pust, is on our board. So it's I know that the world gets inspiration from Norway, and I'm not afraid to say that, and I'm kind of quite proud of that. And I think there's good reason for it, just because we can be progressive, we can be inventive. Sorry, we can play around with concepts to a degree that is more difficult for Finns, Estonians, Latvians, and Lithuanians.
So that's the physical context of badstu and this new emerging wave. But to bring it back to something we were talking about earlier, then what about the cultural stuff that you see developing in Norway?
I would say kind of like here, like all over the place, even though you have a much more, I mean, your society here, of course, has much more influence from different cultures, and it's much bigger. So everything that that becomes big in the UK becomes bigger than in Norway, of course. But if you go to the cities, if you go to Oslo, to some extent to Bergen, it's quite similar.
So are you getting places that do aufguss, that do whisking rituals, that do, some of the stuff we've talked about previously, people playing didgeridoo in the sauna, or life drawing, or queer poetry, or, whatever it might be?
Definitely queer poetry. It has been done. And at least like feminist poetry, that's a big winner, I know, at least in Bergen. Not so much didgeridoo, maybe for more obvious cultural reasons, but there's stuff going on. But I think that what I see here in the UK is that there's much more interest in like putting stuff into the sauna, into the badstu.
The sauna's more of a canvas.
Yeah. And I think to a bigger extent in Norway, people just want to go there and chill out.
Yeah.
So there's, there are, especially in the urban areas, projects for and aufguss, is spreading. There are some really, really good small communities here and there, really like idealistic souls that are traveling around and introducing people to that kind of, or any kind of ritual, really. We don't have that much whisking yet, but we're fortunate to have quite a lot of immigrants from Lithuania and Latvia, so we're trying to use their knowledge and instead of like Norwegians incorporated it, but we're also sending people to, Pirt Spirit in Latvia to learn from them. But, it's much more this, going to badstua together, because people have a memory of just their grandfathers doing it. And it's, it's a way of socializing, especially in the winter when it's cold and dark. Outdoors, kind of outdoors, right? Because it's outdoors, it's next to the sea. In a comfortable way, without any fancy clothes and lots of gear. And you don't need an excuse for it, right? So you can just either go on your own, or you can go with friends. But it's just like going to the badstu is reason enough, right? And I think in Scandinavia we need meeting places outside of the home in the winter. And this the Danish word of hygge, which is, we have the same word in Norwegian, has become this like global phenomenon, right? We say also more kos in Norwegian, which is just like, it's cozy, right? It's not. It means like basically blanket and cup of tea and sitting, at home and just candlelights and just enjoying yourself in the warmth when the whole world is cold and dark and everything, right?
Yeah, nice.
But that's what we had, when it came to dark, long winters. But now you can actually just go out and meet someone, and you don't have to be sitting in a cafe or a restaurant or drinking alcohol. You can just be doing something that feels good and is good and is social and communal. Yeah.
Norway is such a big country, obviously, on a map because of the Mercator projection.
It's not so big; it's just very long.
It's very, very long. So if you flip Norway, it's I think, is it Venice?
No. It's south of Rome.
South of Rome.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's down to almost to Naples.
Naples.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's really long. People don't appreciate how long it is. How does the badstu culture change as you go up north? It must be...
So historically, it's been stronger up north for a couple of reasons. Because it has been... It's just close to Finland. It's like people go to Finland for shopping. So they're just being more connected to Finnish sauna culture. So a lot of people in the north, they say sauna. But it's been strengthened by the fact that you also have what's called the Kvani minority in northern Norway, which is this is a contentious issue, but it's a Finnish language-speaking minority, like a version of Finnish. Like Finns would say it's just an old version of Finnish, but it's in Norway recognized as a national minority and as a national minority language. And the Kvans, who were tradesmen in the Arctic areas for hundreds of years, thousands of years. Some have settled in northern Norway. So and they have their sauna culture, and they've been, Norwegian, Sami, which is the other minority, and Kvani people have been, living in the same areas for basically since the Viking ages, since the Norse started, moving further and further north and mixing into the areas. So it's just become this like mix of cultures, and sauna was part of that. So and even though I don't really know a lot about Sami sauna culture, we know the Sami have had their tents, the teepee-looking tents called lavo, where they had heated rocks and water and the whole thing. Fortunately, I know there's a book being written about exploring that question now, so we'll find out more about it. But these cultures were mixed. So still now today, when you go to northern Norway, to Finnmark, let's get into that issue.
Yeah, we can do that. How long have you got?
No, you'll find people of Kvani descent or Kvans who have their saunas are constructed like in Finland. It's like going to Finland. It looks very different, and they call it sauna. They don't call it badstu, and that's completely fine. I arrest anyone else in most parts of southern Norway for saying sauna, because I'm like, why do you? It's using the English word actually, because they're not using the Finnish word. They're using the English sauna word, and I said it's called badstu. But in two parts of Norway, which is the north where the Kvani minority lives, it's fine that they say sauna, and then you have the east along the border with Sweden, where you have the forest Finns, who were immigrants from the 1700s from Finland. They also have their regular sauna, Finnish sauna culture, so they can say sauna as well, and they have a fantastic smoke sauna culture as well that we love. So, and that's not far from Oslo, so people can go there and experience smoke sauna.
How does your membership change? Do you find there's a lot of membership in and around the Oslo metropolitan area and the southern cities, or have you got members up in northern Finnmark?
I love how you're trying to avoid the Finnmark.
We'll come on to that.
We'll come on to that in a second. No, so the Norwegian Sauna Association, we're open to both private membership and organizations, so companies and non-profits, right? And who are sauna operators. And we're really, since our job is to get sauna out to people, our aim is that, most people have access to a badstu in their local communities and can take the badstu every day. We work through the sauna operators. So now we have 170, since this morning I looked, 171 sauna operators as our members all over Norway. So a rough calculation would say that these have together maybe around 1,000 saunas under operation. And possibly a couple of million visitors every year, right? So, and this spans from like the tiny neighborhood badstue to the biggest spa in Scandinavia, the Well, who's also a member of us, because we want to include the whole badstu family, and everyone who wants to put an effort into building badstu culture, you're welcome, and we'll help you out, and we cooperate with everyone. So, and of course we have different things to offer to different members, but they all seem happy so far, at least.
Yeah. So the Finnmark question.
Okay, Finnmark. Let's do this, because this is interesting. I have, we have your hats hanging here.
Yeah,
your sauna hats with Finnmark written on it.
Yeah.
In blue letters. And to any Norwegian, and including me, I don't know, I discovered you guys a year or two ago, right? And it's just a shock seeing Finnmark, because this is a very concrete geographical description of a part of Norway. It's a county. It's one of our, I don't know how many counties we have now, like 13 counties or something. Yeah. It's the northernmost, but it's also like the name of a county which is most like connected to identity, I think. And most people would think that Finn has something to do with Finland, but it doesn't. So in this regard, right? So Finn is the Old Norse, so Viking word for Sami, so which is the indigenous minority of the areas of northern Scandinavia, and if you would call a Sami a Finn today, it would be a derogative, word. But that was the Old Norse word for it. And mark, back in Old Norse language, it was called Finnmarki. And mark is land. So it was the land of the Finns. It was the Sami land, And so the county is still called Finnmark. And there's even a special law, Norwegian law, regulating property rights in Finnmark. It's called the Law of Finnmark. Because the Sami have a communal ownership to the land of Finnmark, which stands very strong. And it's very contentious, very high conflict levels, because this goes into reindeer herding, it goes into access to natural resources and a lot of other things. So, when a Norwegian sees Finnmark, they're like, wow, why'd you steal that name?
Yeah.
And so to any of our Norwegian listeners, tell me the story. Like, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, so talk about the etymology of it. So when we started out, we were bringing in predominantly equipment and materials from Finland. At the time, there wasn't really representation here in the UK, and the brands from Finland that were represented were taken through bigger corporations that were predominantly Swedes and sold through the pool and spa industry. So it was predominantly either German equipment, Swedish-owned company equipment, and Chinese equipment. And a lot of the original Finnish companies who'd come in the 70s had pulled out. And as you can probably quite appreciate, that generation of Finns who began to export sauna culture made a load of money, did very well for themselves, and then retired and did what all good Finns do and lived in the summer cottages and the Finnish dream. They'd tapped out. So we didn't really have any representation here. And at the same time, there is a symbol for authenticity of production of Finland called the Finnish key flag, sometimes referred to as the Finnish mark, right? So,
which was also the old currency of Finland.
So this is also the old currency. So when we were riffing on the concept, there was a few different things that we that sort of influenced it. There was the Finnish mark, the Finnmark, the currency of Finland, which I love the idea that sauna is a currency of Finland.
That's a good point.
The Finnish mark was the seal of approval that most of our equipment and materials carried.
Yep.
And then there was an element of it which was, I have awareness of the county of Finnmark and the idea that it had the borders of Finland have moved a lot. And there was a time, for example, where Finland had a Arctic Ocean coastline.
Definitely.
The Sami moved throughout northern Finland. And so it's the one place where you need a sauna to live. So those kind of three factors played into that. Coupled with, I was reading literature at the time about the importance of having good plositive sounding. So anybody who doesn't know what plositive means, consonants, and they give examples of Mr. Kodak, who came up with Kodak cameras, and he wanted a word that sounded sort of Japanese because a lot of the camera equipment was being made out there, like Nikon, for example. Sony being, big brands that still persist to this day. And he was an American, and he liked Kodak because it started with a K and ended with a K, and it sounded very plositive. Similarly, swear words often in most languages use plositives because they're just nice, satisfying words to say, very clear. Yeah. So all of those things kind of played into it. And you talked about the etymology of Finns. I hadn't appreciated if you look into this, they talk about sort of Roman era and even older explorers that went to southern Finland, and it may be different now, but certainly last time I looked at this, which was probably a decade ago, it's as simple as they went to an area that was low-lying marsh, and people lived there, and so we in the UK refer to as low-lying marsh as Fenland. And it's the same etymology. Wow. Low-lying, flat, boggy land. And so these fen dwellers, these people who lived on the land of the fens, and it was predominantly just that southern coast So the interaction with those Nordic the people who lived in that bit of the Finnish coast that was happening thousands of years ago that led to this sort of etymology. So this term is something where it's essentially Hyperborean, so people who live up in the boreal forests, and it's kind of flat and marshy, and we don't really know what goes on there. And there's all these mystical tales about warrior women, and I love the idea, and this ties in quite nicely, Amazonian women, warrior women that live up in up in these mystical lands in the north,
forests.
Wow. And so, we use the term Finnmark, and occasionally we get people who say, "Oh, you've appropriated this term
from Norway."
From Norway, who will say, "You've appropriated this term." And I often think, well, if somebody set up a company called England Limited in Norway, I'd go, okay, well, whatever, Or,
that's kind of like that's kind of like when during the the caricature crisis 20 years ago, whatever it was, and people had drawn Muhammad, and people are like, oh, well, I don't get pissed off if you draw Jesus. Like, no, because people don't have the same connection to that concept. And that's what's interesting. That's what's going to be interesting if you ever, I'm not going to ask you if you're planning to expand to Norway at some point. You're very welcome to do so, but it's going to be interesting to see the resistance you meet, branding wise. I'm hoping to, and we're going to get into that issue very soon, to invite you to the International Sauna Congress in Norway next year in 2026, and hopefully people will see your brand there some way. We haven't been talking too much about that, but. But then it's going to be interesting to see, what's the reception of the Norwegian audience, because very few Norwegians who are outside, the very few Norwegians in the sauna community who travel outside Norway, to UK or to the World Sauna Forum or something, they've seen your brand, but we're just, a couple of handful of people who really know your brand.
Well, we were fortunate enough, again, invited by yourself to Badstu Fest last year in Arendal.
Yes, Badstu Fest is our festival concept, our sauna festival concept.
So that was October last year in the Telemark region, south of...
further south. Agder region.
Okay,
sorry about that. Don't ask me
me
about
and Norwegian
British
counties not doing well today. So in Arendal, and we turned up with our Finnmark Sauna hats, and the reception was really good. People, it was quite, and this is why I thought it's obviously a very polar thing, but both polar in terms of geographical, but I mean polar in terms of how it separates people, because people are like, oh, I just love that you guys are championing this, and that something we can identify with, and I just love the brand, and so it was quite positive. But occasionally we get people who go, oh well, this is a geographical place.
And here's an interesting challenge for you. Come to Varanger Sauna Festival in Finnmark from the 12th to the 14th of June. And that goes out to all the listeners, of course, as well. It's a fantastic sauna festival up in like the far, far northeast of Norway. You'll be east of Istanbul.
Wow.
Norway stretches far north, but it also in the top there, it just goes east.
Wow.
And so you're east of Istanbul, you're next door to Russia, and there's a sauna festival there going on for 4 days. It's magnificent, and it's based on this Kväni culture that I just talked about. So it's very Finnish, super good. I'm gonna be there. Mikkel Åland is gonna be there. And Risto Eloma, the president of the International Sauna Association, is gonna be there this year. It's super great. It's gonna be the second year this year. Go up there, join us, bring the hats, and see the reactions. That's going to be interesting. No, it's not necessarily going to be bad, but you're going to have some interesting conversations.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I mean, what's interesting is from our side is it came about from something that wasn't connected to the place, but obviously it is a place, and there's always going to be contention on those kind of things. But I have only respect for those cultures and those places where sauna is really important. I mean, we take great pride in what we do here. We're not just rebadging cheap Chinese stuff or, the service. We don't just sell boxes. And often I'll say to people, one of the key things that differentiates us from a lot of the companies, both here in the UK and worldwide, is I go and speak to sauna companies and their owners and staff. They don't sauna. They don't enjoy sauna. Exactly. They're just selling a box. They're selling a product. It could be a fridge, could be a washing machine, could be, it could be any box.
Yeah.
They don't care. We live and breathe what we do, and we do it because we're really passionate about it. And from my side, I kind of look at that as, if there's a company that really, and you've been around our facilities, you've seen the kind of the level of the level that we go to.
Yeah.
Like to have a company that takes the utmost pride in the work they do and supports the culture, to be associated, only purely in the similarity of the name to what was the original intention, hopefully is a respectful thing.
Definitely.
If I was, if we were selling Chinese infrared cabins, then I would wholeheartedly expect to be crucified if I go up there. So
no, I think mostly you just have a story to tell.
Yeah,
like you need to convince people, and they're gonna be, you talk to Southerners the last time, and there's a huge difference.
Of course.
If you go up there, they're gonna have their spikes out, or at least have some questions about it. But let's just talk about that briefly though, because you guys came to.
So unfortunately, this is the point in the podcast where the audio dropped out, just as Stig started to talk there about our trip to Badstu Fest last year. He went on to explain the origins of the festival and how it was to celebrate the launch of a book called Badstu Folk, written by friends Knut and Halgrim on the topic of sauna culture in Norway. As we rejoin the podcast, he starts to explain how it's evolved and where it's heading. So without further ado, let's hop back in.
So they wrote this book, and they were going to hold, you always hold a launch party, but they ended up holding a launch festival, and it was called Badstu Fest, which means sauna party, or sauna festival, and it became a great success. So they realized, okay, we're not releasing a new book next year, we need to repeat the festival. So they did that festival for 3 years. Up there, and a huge part of it is just that you drive around from badstu to badstu during the day on Saturday, and just explore different badstu in the area. And after 3 years, the guys were kind of like, they have families and jobs and everything, and they were like, okay, can Norwegian Sauna Association just take care of this brand for a while and just take it out on a tour to other places in Norway where it's possible to sort of take care of this heritage and take this concept further. So we did last year for the first time, have it in Arendal on the south coast, on the Skagerrak coast of Norway, on an island. Basically, lots of mobile saunas, lots of cheap, nice, centrally located accommodation. I mean, centrally located in the fact that everyone can stay in the same place. You have a dining hall, you have a place where you can disco in the evening, very simple disco, just a great party, right? Yeah. And then on Saturday, just, sauna to sauna all around the area, beautiful locations. It's just fun, and quite cheap. We're trying to hold the price really low down, and we're doing it in the same location this year, in the end of September. I think it's the final weekend of September. Are you guys coming back?
I want to, but this morning somebody told me that the Alfgus Championships is held at the same time, and obviously we sponsor those guys, so we might have to send Max one way and me the other.
I think so, yeah. At least one of you.
But it's beautiful. I mean,
how'd you like it?
Absolutely loved it. Yeah.
What did you like about it? Max?
The atmosphere. As you say, it's the point of entry, I guess, to make it more accessible, also adds so much charm, and so it's a very organic and natural feeling kind of thing. There's a lot of, and I think maybe this is also maybe why I liked it so much, was I might be projecting here, but it seems like Norwegian kind of culture and personality is very much you go do you, man, you have fun.
Yeah.
And that plays very much into the British sentiments too. So we had a very fun time just kind of floating around doing what we wanted to do.
And I was sort of the head of everything. I had no control whatsoever. It's just like, it just happened.
Yeah.
It's like, I was just so happy when it was over and everyone was happy because it just worked out. Finally, this year I got some help on board, but I don't know. How did you like it, Jake?
Yeah, I guess for me, the coast there, I spent a fair amount of time on the other side, on the Bohuslän coast in northwest Sweden and up to southern Norway, and that whole granite landscape coast I just think is really beautiful. We were there in autumn, which is a nice time of year for me, and I think the beautiful coastline coupled with the fact that it brought together a different set of people than it's no secret that I end up going to a lot of these sauna events all around the world, and there is a core group of us that are like carnies,
international faces.
We just sort of like we're like a village that are seeing each other in different places, right? And that's great. I love those guys. Absolutely, real. Very much a strong community and a family, and and I say that family, and just 2 days ago after UK Sauna Summit, our sauna fathers and uncles joined us in the Banja. So we had Glenn Auerbach of Sauna Times, Alan from Kivia, and Mikael Arland, and it just, you can be completely relaxed in yourself, and it really does feel like a family. It was a completely different set of people I'd never met before, and made amazing connections. And what I love, again, to echo Max's sentiments, is the Norwegian culture has a very dry sense of humor that doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's a big parallel. So I often find, in my personal opinion, that weirdly Estonians, Norwegians, and Brits kind of have this,
and Dutch.
And the Dutch to an extent, So those four seem weirdly. You get a group of you get a group of people together with a few beers, and the comedy is the same. You can take the piss out of yourself. You don't take yourself too seriously, and even in commerce as well. Those four cultures are very good at being innovative, iterative, and dynamic. And so I felt very at home, very comfortable, and the bit of the Norwegian coast there just reminded me of trips up to northern Scotland that I'd had around that time of year as well. And it's, for me, a personal tragedy that for a culture that connects quite heavily with the Nordics, which would be the Scots. So, go up to Shetland and Orkney. They even carry the Nordic Cross, for example. A lot of parallels there. And they don't have the same sort of access to sauna that many places, and I think
it's happening though.
It is happening.
It's great, and I'm going up.
Really
tomorrow I'm going up to Ely Seaside Saunas. Judith Dunlop doing a fantastic job up there. There's of course many sauna operators in Scotland that I don't know yet, and I'm looking forward to meet them. And Judith and I were doing a small, tiny event together about sauna travels to Norway. Because she set up this thing with. I met her at the Well, the spa outside Oslo, a few months ago, where she had her first group that she brought to Norway for just a sauna trip, a badstu trip, to explore the Norwegian badstu scene, and which is fantastic, and I just love it, and I just want to applaud the work she's doing.
She's a force for like positivity and ambassadorship, just of everything.
Totally. So
she's great.
So we're doing that tomorrow. I'm looking forward to go to Scotland for the first time in my life, and just I guess feel at home. We're stopping between here and Edinburgh. It's Lindisfarne. And which marks the start of the Viking
invading
age.
Again.
They invaded it in 835, right? I think it was the Norwegian invasion.
You have to time the tides right. When you
I know. I've been looking at this, because I think
You'll get stuck if
it's sort of like a symbol of what's happening right now with the sort of the similar kind of badstu culture coming into the British Isles from the east. We're not going to do as much plundering and raping this time. Well, I promise you that.
It's funny that we're based in Durham. We'll give you the tour and show you how Durham is established purely off the back of evading Nordic invasion.
Evading? I read to you earlier that all the ladies, they wanted to be with us.
Well, the city of Durham is founded by monks who fled Lindisfarne from the constant.
Sorry, I pronounced that incorrectly, didn't I? Lindisfarne, not Farne. Okay.
Lindisfarne.
Farne.
Okay, so we have the Farne Islands up there as well. Lindisfarne is actually weirdly not one of the Farne Islands. It's its own separate island. But the beautiful castles and just that whole coastline, big skies. Again, you feel right at home. It's
fantastic.
It's
and I guess we're approaching the end here, but and one of the important reasons why I'm coming here, I'm really learning from what's happening here in the UK, because it's happening on such a massive scale. The boom here is accelerating so fast now, and I think I talk a lot to Mark Lamb, director of the British Sauna Society, because we see so many parallels in how Norway and Britain is developing. We have a lot to learn from each other, and I think an exchange on a broader level between the UK and Norwegian sauna scene is really just positive, and that's why I hope a lot of people come to Badstu Fest. But I'm also here to promote the fact that Norway, Oslo, and the Norwegian Sauna Association is hosting the International Sauna Congress next year, which is going to be a huge thing.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, International Sauna Congress has been held since the 1950s every 4th year. So it's kind of like the Olympics. It's the Olympics of sauna, right?
Yeah.
But it's its roots are kind of like academic. So there's talks and panels and stuff like that. And it's in the bylaws of the International Sauna Association how these congresses are going to be held, to the extent that there should be new research presented, of the benefits of sauna and etc. So we're hosting it in the end of September next year, 24th to 26th, 2026. And it's going to be a big event. We're trying to get 500 people in. We'll try to sort of make sure that tickets go out to all interested countries. So it's not suddenly going to be just one,
all the Norwegians.
Or like 450 Germans and 10 Norwegians and you guys.
Sounds like a great party.
But so we're working on that. We're working on building the organization now. Fortunately, I have a fantastic project manager who's working on it now, Martina, who was also at the Sauna Summit. But we're going to have 3 thematic stages of where one is sauna and health, the other is in global sauna culture, and that is going to be one on architecture, technology, and sustainability. And in addition to that, we're going to have like a live podcast sauna scene. I hope to see you guys there and your podcast there, right? Where we can rotate a few podcasts, have some live interviews in a huge 80-seater theatrical sauna, which is just going to be fun. People can walk in and out and take part in the conversations. But we're also going to have, the opening of the whole thing is going to happen in Oslo City Hall. I mean, the same room where they every year award out the Nobel Peace Prize. Same bloody stage, which is going to be huge. Hosted by the mayor of Oslo. This is going to be very, very nice. And then we're taking everyone up to the well, Scandinavia's biggest spa, for a full night at the well, and then 2 days of conference, and of course nights at the floating sauna villages. And we're setting up trips that people can sign up for before and after the conference to different parts of Norway if they want to see different kinds of nature, different kind of badstu culture. And, it's just, I think for sauna enthusiasts around the world, for sauna enthusiasts in the UK, a fantastic opportunity to sort of both explore Norway and Norwegian badstu culture, but also, learn more about badstu, get inspired, get connected with other people, and just, sauna together.
Sounds like the trip of a lifetime.
Sounds
so you guys are coming, right?
Yeah,
of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, looking forward to Sauna Radio. I guess that's in Salt, right? The big.
Yeah. So this is the main program would happen in Salt, which is this kind of, what can we call it? It's like
Sompa sauna.
No, very different, I would say, because Salt is a professional arts and music scene. It's just,
but it's community driven.
It's a company. It's just this part of the docks in downtown Oslo that wasn't used for anything. It was like a parking lot or something, and they started like an art project, wanted to set up like this huge, very strange sauna there a few years ago. Alan, the guy who owns it and runs it, has been on our board for many years. He's just such a force in Norwegian cultural life. He started many of Norway's most famous music festivals, and he also together with people like Sami Rintala, the Finnish architect I mentioned earlier, rebuilt like an old whaling vessel into like a spa ship with saunas and hammams and stuff that is still, not under his ownership still, but still traveling around northern Norway and taking people on like ski and sauna trips, and it's insane. Check it out, Vulcana. It's called Vulcana.
Okay,
it's just an amazing ship. You can book in and go on this like several day trips and just have your sauna with you.
Amazing.
And a hammam in like the bottom of the ship and everything.
Wow.
It's insane. Anyway, so it's an arts and culture space. It's where you have concerts, you have stand-up shows, you have all these things like outdoors area with lots of bars, food trucks, everything, and you have many saunas in there and a huge 80-seater among other things. So people can look at the program, and if they don't feel that interested in the next topic, they can just pop into the sauna for half an hour and then come back in their bathrobe. So it's going to be, I think, when it comes to conferences, very different.
Yeah.
Very different,
Nice.
but still, very respectful of what this Congress is about.
Mm-hmm.
It's about disseminating new knowledge about sauna and its effects and benefits, and sort of spreading that out to the world, and hopefully, the premium sauna researchers in the world will be there and present their findings. So
Brilliant.
That's what we're going to be working on for the next year or so. And wow, man, we got a lot of work to do. But the website is coming up pretty soon. It's saunacongress2026.org.
Great.
Which is going to be, you can go there, I think, pretty soon and sign up for a newsletter and be the first ones to know when tickets are launched and everything.
Great.
So keep an eye on that. Yeah. And
if people want to know about the Badstu Fest,
go to badstufest.no.
Yeah.
badstufest.no.
Great.
And Badstulaug?
Oh my God, there's so many badstu words, right?
Yeah. Where's best place?
I think we do have an English language version of the website. So if you Google the Norwegian Sauna Association, I guess you're going to find it. But it's Norges Badstulaug.no.
Brilliant.
You're going to find a lot of interesting stuff there.
And you guys are going to be on socials, or these events are on socials as well, so you can find them on.
Yeah, we haven't made the Instagram account for the Congress yet, but it's coming up soon.
You better do that before somebody hears this and then they jump on it.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'm going to do it tonight.
Do it this evening. Yeah.
We have a great agency working on our website right now, so it's on the way. I had a meeting with them yesterday actually, and it's looking great. So it's just such a fun project. It's just so great to be in a position at this point in time where your job is to gather the global sauna community.
Yeah.
It's such a privilege.
Yeah.
And this job that I have is such a ridiculous privilege.
But I must say, Stig, you're a fantastic orator. You're clearly incredibly passionate about it. Yeah. And Norway's very lucky to have you holding the torch and leading the way.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast as well. I'm conscious this one's gone on a little longer than usual, but it's always a good sign. So
it was a pleasure, guys, and I've been looking forward to it. And thanks a lot for everything you guys are doing as well, especially for the UK sauna scene, because it's so inspiring to see what's happening over here. And I know much of it is thanks to the work you guys are putting down. So thanks a lot.
Thanks.